Welcome to the Dark Ozarks. We are talking about the dark side of the winter holiday season. It hasn't always been what you imagine. The Dark Ozarks podcast is now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and just about any podcast platform.
Now, what makes a good winter story? Celebrations, joy, gifts, forgetting the world around you.
Wait, where are the phantom huntsmen, the fairies, spectral animals, and ghosts?
Well, that's the other side of the holiday season, and a reminder that the other side of evil is not as far away as we pretend, even during joyous times.
Thank you to everyone who came out to the Dark Ozarks live events over the past few weeks. More coming after the first of the year. Find details for upcoming events at paranormalsciencelab.com. And now you can get Dark Ozarks t-shirts for sale at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com.
What are the noir traditions of this time of year?
That is a surprisingly wide-ranging list that we don't often partake in these days, except maybe an occasional Christmas Carol TV movie. But that is only a small part of Dark Christmas and Yule lore. What is the grandest theme in your opinion?
I really have to say it's the wild hunt or the wild host. But let's start there just as soon as we give a shout out to our great sponsors who help us bring the Dark Ozarks to everyone.
We encourage everyone to check out Always Buying Books in Joplin, Missouri, in person and online on Facebook, and their website, alwaysbuyingbooks.com, for all of your reading needs, including a large section on the paranormal, history, and more, not to mention the building's haunted. Tell Bob and Elise that we sent you.
And we also want to thank Beard Engine Brewing Company in Alba, Missouri. Beard Engine Brewing is the only English-style brewery in Missouri and is twice named Missouri's best brewery by the Missouri Brewers Association. They have great beer and food in a building with a historical and noir past, and that building is also haunted. So tell Nate and Tiff that we sent you.
Okay, the Wild Hunt. I have to agree, it's one of my favorite dark tales. And it probably is pretty grand when you think about it. It's large in scope in every way, sort of like a Broadway show of mythology.
I think that it's incredibly fair. There's many, many pieces to really pull from for individuals who might be unfamiliar with the wild hunt. It has a lot of different moving parts, pun intended, but it is, in short, a spectral army that of ghoulish huntsmen that ride through the night sky on a winter storm, led by Odin.
But although that's where it started, the motif is really adopted throughout Northern Europe.
It is. It has many different versions, many different elements of the host, and the leader changes depending upon your region, pretty dramatically. It's fair to say that Odin or Woden or Wotan is the leader origin point, but Berkta, the goddess of the winter mountains, sometimes takes that place, as well as a lot of other possible characters. And those have a considerable range. Theodoric the Great, Danish King Valdemar Atterdag, Gwyneth Nuth, and then I think it's interesting, Herod, Cain, the devil. There's an interesting lineup of most wanted that get the job.
Well, and I think as you just the litany that you just listed, it became a way of incorporating the existing pagan beliefs into the church by bringing in the devil and Cain and so forth.
It does. And especially with Herod and Cain, what you're looking at is the incorporation of highly simplified villains from a church history, and putting that connotation. Herod, I find particularly interesting. Obviously, he's the bad guy at the Christmas season, but in a modern retelling, we would likely not pull out the Christmas story, the biblical Christmas story, and say, where's the bad guy that we can put in place of Odin or Berkta, and put him in the Wild Hunt. I think, especially when you consider how culturally and geographically removed Israel from 2,000 years ago was to Northern Europe of 1,000 years ago, it's a bit of a culture clash, but I understand why.
A little mashup, that's for sure.
And you do have an interesting conflation in regards to the ghosts, the spectral dead of the hunt, and the host, if you will. And that's including ghostly dogs, ghostly horses, both animals associated with the underworld, as well as fairies, Valkyries, and elves. And in case y'all haven't put it together, we have a man, a magical, immortal Northern European man with a beard, with large animals flying in the sky in December.
Yeah. And not only that, but accompanied by a host of other spirits, and that you could be pulled away, your spirit pulled away in your sleep as they went over.
Yes. That one I found really, really interesting.
Yeah. That gives just a little bit of a different color to reindeer going over. So beware, children. You may not survive the night.
Dasher and Dancer pulled up my soul.
Suddenly, coal in the stocking sounds a lot better.
If you have ever had your soul pulled out by Christmas reindeer, you may be entitled to compensation.
Apparently.
It is, and obviously there are a lot of factors, but there is a strong through line between the Wild Hunt and Santa and the Flying Reindeer.
Yes, they're definitely threads. It's not the only origin point of Santa, but Santa sort of kind of over time gathered various lore and real life practices into his own mythology.
He has, I found this particularly interesting. The Dutch figure of Sinterklaas includes Santa with a long gray beard, no big surprise, but that he is riding a gray horse at night, which does have strong undertone connections with Odin, admittedly, as does Gandalf.
Oh, yes. And I think that's the thing, is that where people are probably seeing this imagery now is more in fantasy writing and movies. And Lord of the Rings definitely borrows from this. Very,
very much so. And, I just happen to have an encyclopedia of Tolkien, the history and mythology that inspired Tolkien's world by David Day, which I picked up at Always Buying Books on Saturday. There's a section about Odin in there. It's quite convenient.
Imagine that. And I think that's one of the things is that those words, I mean, they're wonderful on their own, standing alone. But when you view them in context of the lore that they draw off of, they're even more amazing, in my opinion. And not to bust anyone's bubble, but no, Tolkien did not draw all of his inspiration from his imagination, and the world of Middle Earth, erupt from his brain. He relied heavily on existing lore.
Very much so, and really was he as a scholar made no secret of that during the time of his work.
Very true, very true. He wasn't trying to hide the.
No, it's something that oftentimes gets overshadowed by works that sometimes positively, sometimes negatively are derivative. But obviously, when you watch Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, still one of my all-time favorite art pieces of all time, is the reason it resonates so powerfully is because it does draw from so many layers of folklore that whether you ascribe to a collective unconscious like Carl Jung theorized, or even just the genetic memory of thousands of years of our ancestors, there is just something that resonates with that work. It's not there by accident. It was drawing from this material.
Exactly. And that may be a jumping off place for our longer format, which you can look for tomorrow night to be uploaded, that will discuss this and other subjects in the Dark Yule in greater depth. And don't forget to check out upcoming events and merchandise at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com. Thank you again to Always Buying Books and Beard Engine Brewing Company for helping bring the Dark Ozarks to everyone.
On the next episode, we're going to be discussing cryptids and creatures, specifically lore versus science. Catch the Dark Ozarks podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. Thank you, everyone. And remember,